Hi and welcome back to part 2 of my series covering the basic rules of the Napoleonic 20 series using Fate and Glory, specifically the components from Salamanca. Generally speaking, a unit zone of control extends to the 6 hexes surrounding the hex occupied by that unit. Exceptions to that rule include major rivers. Even at fords or bridges, a unit zone of control does not extend beyond the river. However, it would extend beyond a minor river. Another exception includes fortified or redoubt hexes. So in this case, the unit zone of control would not extend into Salamanca. And the third exception is between 2 adjacent town hexes. So if this unit were in La Peña, his zone of control would not extend into Calvarrasa de Arriba. I think it goes without saying that each day is broken down into phases: morning, midday, afternoon, dusk, evening, and night. Night turns are special cases, and they affect the way zones of control are handled, specifically when it comes to movement. During the day, which is everything from morning through evening, a unit may freely enter an enemy zone of control, or EZOC, EZOC, but they're pretty much stuck there till combat. However, at night, which is roughly every 5th or 6th turn, a unit, as part of their movement, may freely exit an EZOC, but they may not enter one. So the whole concept is pretty much flipped on its head. So let's say it's your turn and you, during the movement phase, moved all of your units, including this one as the anti-French player. Your opponent then has a chance to react with its cavalry units that find themselves in your zone of control. They can do this by performing one of 3 actions. The first one is a countercharge, the second one is disengagement, and the third is an optional rule, but I'm going to go ahead and incorporate it since it's not that difficult to implement. It's called the cavalry penetration. The countercharge is a type of attack that the defending unit can perform during the reaction phase, which occurs after the phasing player, their opponent's movement phase. In this situation, this cavalry unit has a choice of attacking both one or none of the adjacent units whose zones of control it occupies. In this situation, these 2 cavalry units, during the reaction phase of the allied player's turn, would be able to combine in a countercharge for an attack against this unit right here. During a countercharge, the cavalry unit's attack combat strength is doubled when attacking. So that's how it differs from regular combat. The exception is when it is attacking another cavalry unit, in which case you just use the combat strength as written on the counter. So another difference between countercharge attacks and regular combat is, let's say in this situation, this French cavalry unit were performing a countercharge against this allied unit. If this allied unit were to win that battle, he would not be able to advance after combat as he would in a normal combat situation. Another action that the opponent's cavalry can perform is disengagement. To disengage, it simply moves 1 hex away from the enemy whose zone of control it occupies. In this case, it would be this unit here. So the exception is that it cannot disengage into the zone of control of another enemy unit. So in this situation, it has one option, and that is to disengage into this hex. This hex is non-enemy controlled, vacant, adjacent, and non-prohibited. If instead this were the scenario where a friendly unit occupies the hex it would normally disengage into, then it has the option to move through that friendly unit until it reaches a hex that fits the criteria. In that case, it would be this hex right here. A major exception to this rule is that a cavalry unit cannot disengage when it's in the zone of control of an enemy cavalry unit. The third option is, well, it's an optional rule called cavalry penetration. And it begins a lot like disengagement in the sense that you're leaving the zone of control of an enemy unit, but instead of going into an adjacent non-enemy controlled vacant hex, you are instead entering the zone of control of a different unit, enemy unit. So, for example, it would look like this. Again, there's a small exception when it comes to the cavalry units of the phasing player. If the reacting player is in the zone of control of an enemy cavalry unit, it may not perform cavalry penetration. It may not exit a cavalry unit ZOC, and it may not enter one. So in this situation, it cannot disengage from this enemy cavalry unit, and it cannot perform cavalry penetration into this ZOC. Its only real option would be to perform a countercharge, in which case its combat strength is at its normal value and not doubled. I think in continuation, I'd like to talk a little bit more in depth about combat, and also this whole concept of morale points, how they can be spent, how they can be accumulated, and how they affect victory and defeat conditions. So those are two very important concepts, kind of the meat and the driver of the game. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for watching. Okay, totally unrelated to Fading Glory, with my recent purchase of Warriors of God from Multiman Publishing, they included in the box this, I can't remember if it was in the game box or if it was just in the packaging, this little postcard-sized board game for 2 players. It's called Operation Cerberus, the channel dash. It's published by Against the Odds magazine as part of their Pocket Battle series. In 2011, apparently it takes about 20 minutes to play, and it comes with some pictures of counters that you can cut out. They're double-sided, and teeny tiny font. The setup, game concept, gameplay, and it looks like descriptions of each of the various phases and then victory conditions. So maybe one of these days I'll actually cut it up and try it out, so we'll see.